We've been going through the book of Nehemiah and looking at leaving a legacy. Because it's the 50th anniversary of the founding of this church, we can see the legacy that was left behind for us by the previous members, and we want to look at what kind of legacies we might leave behind for the next 50 years. Well, I want to talk about the devil. Now, we Presbyterians, we don't do real well on the whole devil thing. There's Presbyterians who are convinced that the devil's sitting right next to them all the time. And then there's Presbyterians on the other end of the spectrum that just want to say, we're all grown-ups here. Can't we just agree that the devil doesn't exist? Well, I don't care where you fall on that spectrum, but you probably fall somewhere in between those two forms. But this morning we're going to talk about the spiritual forces that seek to derail us from our legacy. I've subtitled this sermon, How to Protect the Spiritual Leaders of Your Church. We're doing lots of great things around here, and you can always tell when you're doing what's right, because that's when you come across all kinds of trouble. That's when the devil sneaks in and tries to derail you. Well, Nehemiah lets us know that there are three different strategies that the forces of evil will use to try and derail our legacy. The first lying strategy is distraction. The forces of evil will try to distract us from our ministries. They'll try to get us focusing on other things. They'll try to come up with all kinds of different issues that we should probably focus on instead of the main thing. You've seen that poster. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. But the forces of evil would like to distract us. I've talked a little bit about family systems theory. That's the psychological or sociological idea of using the family as a model for how groups interact, whether you're talking about a church or about a business or whatever. Well, one of family systems theory's great sayings is, if mom and dad are fighting, we don't have to clean our room. And if the forces of evil can keep us distracted from the main thing, then we won't get the main thing done. Nehemiah writes that Sanballat and Tobiah wrote him, "Come and meet us at Kepharim in the valley of Ono." They wanted to distract him. Well, the way to protect your spiritual leaders in this church is to support your leadership's vision. We're very blessed in this church. We have some amazing people who are doing leadership in the session and with the deacons. And they're trying to carve out a vision for the future of this church. Do your best to try and support them. Look at what Nehemiah says. "I knew they were scheming to hurt me, so I sent messengers back with this: I'm doing a great work." Ladies and gentlemen, we are doing a great work in this place we call Grace Presbyterian Church. It's easy to see just by making a lap around. Now I realize not a lot of you like to jog, so you don't have to jog. Just make a lap around the fellowship hall and take a look at all of the amazing ministries that are happening because of the people in this church. We need to not get distracted. We need to support the vision of our leadership. The second thing we need to do, Nehemiah tells us, is that we need to value our leadership's time. There are a lot of folks who've spent a lot of time planning and preparing and implementing the different ministries that we're doing in this place. Give them an attaboy once in a while. If you come by on a Tuesday around 10 o'clock-ish, stop by the clothes closet and give them an attaboy. Stop by the office and give them an attaboy when they're handing out the food that we do every Tuesday. Stop by the bicycle ministry. I could go on. Go around the lap in the fellowship hall and give them all an attaboy. We need to appreciate their time. We need to not be distracted from the ministries that we're doing in this place. The second lying strategy that the forces of evil will try and impose upon us is slander. Look at what Sanballat wrote about Nehemiah. The word is out among the nations that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. Remember that the leadership in Babylon had allowed Nehemiah to come and rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. They gave him all the supplies. They even sent a guard with him. They gave him some money and an allowance so that he could do the work that he needed to do. And Sanballat spread a rumor that now that he's in charge in Jerusalem, that they're going to rebel against Babylon. They're going to try and take over. You see, slander is a powerful tool of the enemy. If you want to destroy a church, just start saying bad things about the pastor. If you want to destroy a church, start saying bad things about the leadership. And slander's preferred media is the video screen, is the letter. I don't know why those things are flickering on and off this morning and giving me a little gas. The slander's preferred media is the letter. You know, I had been a baby pastor for a few years before I learned a very valuable lesson. I learned that if I received a letter, especially one that didn't have a return address, that I would open it, and the first thing that I would do is look at the end of the letter to see if anyone had signed it. You'd be amazed. I used to have I finally threw it away. I used to have an entire folder full of these letters that I had never read. People send nastygrams to the pastor and don't sign it, and they say slanderous things. If you send me a letter and you don't sign it, it's not going to get read. If you're taking notes and you want to put a little parentheses under the preferred media of the letter, you can put email. Slander loves to use email, but it didn't take the slanderers long to figure out that if you send me a slanderous email, I know who sent it. So they don't send me the slanderous emails anymore. They'll send it to you and to you and to you and to you and to you. And when I was in Sacramento Presbytery on the Committee on Ministry, I can't count the number of times that we had to help out local pastors who had had horrible emails sent to everyone in his congregation, saying things that you just couldn't imagine. Slander destroys ministries, it destroys churches, and it destroys leadership. But one thing about slander is that you can know that the slander is out of proportion with the reality. Look at what Sanballat writes about Nehemiah. The word is out that you want to be king and that you have appointed prophets to announce in Jerusalem, there's a king in Judah. Now, not only does he want to rebel, he wants to be his own king. He's going to make himself king. He's going to pay off some prophets so that they'll announce God has sent a king, and it's Nehemiah. The slander is always out of proportion with reality. I got to tell you a funny story about last week. Now, if you remember last week, we preached about how the worst attacks come from within. And I was talking about how sometimes we need to be called on the carpet, and sometimes we need to call the pastor on the carpet, and sometimes we need to call the leadership on the carpet, but sometimes the church needs to be called on the carpet. And I said something to the effect of, sometimes that rotten little pastor has to call us on the carpet. Well, someone in the congregation thought that I used a different word than pastor that starts with a B and kind of sounds like pastor. And I got a phone call this week, and someone said to me, hey, I heard that you used a profanity from the pulpit. I said, I did. And they told me what they thought, this person thought that I had said. And I said, gee, I use profanities once in a while, but that's not one I usually use. So I went back and I listened to the tape. Thank you, Carolyn. And in fact, I did not use a cuss word, but I probably needed to enunciate a bit more clearly. But see, rumors like that can be spread around, and the next thing you know, the pastor's a rotten, evil, horrible person, and I didn't even do it. Listen, there's lots of things I do wrong that you can get me on, but please don't get me on something I didn't do. The slander is always out of proportion, and we can battle slander with the truth and hard work. There's nothing to what they're saying. You've made it all up. They were trying to intimidate us into quitting. You see, there's going to be times around here when you hear all kinds of terrible stuff about what's going on. The way to battle it is to figure out the truth and to work that much harder. The third lying strategy that the enemy uses is the enemy uses threats. Let's find safety behind locked doors because they're coming by night to kill you. Bad things are going to happen. People are going to leave the church. They're going to stop giving their tithes. Horrible things are going to happen. The pastor's going to get fired. Well, we can battle these threats by remembering that God promised us something. Remember God's promise to us that He would always be with us. And I'm convinced that God has promised us that this church is going to do amazing things. We're already doing them. Do the lap around the fellowship hall just to see. Why would a man like me run for cover? I won't do it. Remember that God called you to do this ministry. And the second way to battle threats is with the brains God gave you. I sensed that God hadn't sent this man. If you hear things that just sound too crazy to be true, use the brain God gave you and go, well, that probably just isn't true. And if you got any questions, please call me. The best thing about what happened last week is that somebody called me and said, hey, this is what I heard. Praise God, somebody called me. If you got a problem or if there's something I'm doing that you don't like, please come and talk to me about it. I haven't ever hit anybody yet. And finally, Nehemiah tells us that we can battle these threats from the enemy with prayer. He said, oh my God, don't let them get away with all the mischief they've done. And the same goes for those who've been trying to undermine my confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, if I had a buck for every time I told you this, we would never need to take offering again. But prayer is the most amazing, powerful tool that we have. And I believe that God designed prayer in such a way that you don't have to be eloquent. You don't have to be young and strong. You don't have to have a lot of time. You don't have to do a whole lot of anything other than just talk to Him. And even if you can't talk, you can think your prayers. It's a powerful tool that everyone can use. And I beg of you, please pray for our church. Please pray for our elders and deacons. Please pray for our organist and choir. Please pray for Pastor Karen, and please pray for me. Because that's where the power in this church comes from. When the people of God gather together under a united purpose to serve Him, amazing things happen. And 50 years from now, those folks are going to look back at us and go, wow, thank God for those folks.